we recognize as a cotehardie in about the middle of the 14th century. And before then, you were looking at looser garments. And one very nice thing about the cotehardie is that it's cut in a way that just makes everybody look so much more attractive, I think. It fits just about any form. And, okay, all I'm seeing is you, Mistress Columella. All I'm seeing is the still image of you. How did you change that last time?
Just a moment, working on it.
Okay.
Okay, for some reason it's not letting me do it this time. And there we go, spotlight video.
Okay, yes. All right. So the fitted cotehardie will look good on just about any female form because it's very supportive. And I'm going to tip this down just a bit. It's very supportive in the bust area, and then it's very snug. So if you've got any form right there at all, it shows it. And then you have a long, full skirt, possibly with a train. They were, from the artwork at least, they were very, very popular. And this just, whether you're skinny, whether you're larger, all the curves look impressive when they're displayed this way. So of course, everybody's going to want one, right? And now cutting one out is not nearly as difficult as it would seem to be because you've basically just got 4 panels, 1, 2, and then in the back, of course. And your sleeves get sewn on usually right about here, lower if you want something simpler, but usually right up here, just a little bit off the shoulder works. And this shoulder neckline, again, suits just about anybody. I have fitted one for a lady who was a triple G, and she was impressed with how well it fit. Yes, and Janelle has mentioned that there's a way to minimize the sausage look. If you look at the artwork, and I'll bring up one from the very beginning of the 15th century, so toward the...
Avoid the sausage look.
Yes.
They can't hear me.
The Cotehardie hit its peak at the very end of the 14th century and beginning of the 15th. And I'm going to show you a very famous image. This is from the TRU, which is beginning of the 15th century. And in this image right here, you can see how very full her skirt is. And in any of them, even the peasant one over here, very full skirt. If your cotehardie is snug just below the bust, that will hold up the bust. If it immediately starts filling out and becoming flared, then you're not going to have that sausage look. And there's a very good reason for putting the flare up so high, other than the fact that everybody wants to avoid the sausage look. This fashion developed at a time when pretty much any married adult woman, which was pretty much any woman who wasn't a nun, spent possibly half her adult life pregnant. And if you're going to spend half your adult life pregnant, you're going to want to look really good pregnant. And your everyday clothing is going to be designed to accommodate certain changes to your body. So if your flare starts at about where the floating ribs are, you're going to have enough room for that by the time you get to the part of your body where you need that room. And I have a dog friend.
Maybe, come here.
I currently have mine belted up because I have dog friends right now. But you can see there's fullness even just below my floating ribs. By the time you get to my hips, there's a lot of fullness. So it's very helpful. Now, did anyone print up or at least access the worksheet? I think the worksheet is over here.
No, it's in my book. Here,
Okay. No, that's
that's mine.
in a Ziploc baggie. That will work, thank you. Okay. So, has anyone brought up the worksheet? Got a glare. Yes, thank you. The female Cotehardie construction worksheet. If you have your worksheet, it will tell you which measurements you need to get in order to make your Cotehardie. So, is anyone measuring along, or are we just going to talk our way through it? I'm going to need you for this part. Okay. Janelle, Melina?
Yes.
I have a friend here who is going to be our example for the measuring. So,
I'm wearing a French shirt, just, you know, that's
to be
appropriate.
easier to measure. And I'm going to raise this up so we can see better. There. Now, the most important measurement to take is the bust, because you need enough room there, but pretty much everything is going to be going out from there or in from there, depending. So I take your measurement, make sure that the tape is completely horizontal, and write down your measurement on your worksheet, line 1.
We're doing inches or centimeters?
Well, this is a metric worksheet, so you'll want to use the metric. Then right under the bust, where the bra band is, you want to take your measurement for number 2.
With or without a bra?
Thank you. Oh, thought someone had asked.
No,
You want to take the measurement with the bra. In fact, when I'm taking the measurements, I like to do it with whatever short garments you feel are necessary to make you feel correct. Because then when we tweak it to make the Cotehardie supportive, we've got you where you want to be.
Yeah, I want to go.
Yes, so we don't have far to go to tweak it to make it right. So the bra band measurement is measurement 2. And then you're going to come down here to the waist Sometimes that's significant, sometimes it's not. It depends on whether your skirt will flare enough to cover your waist or whether we need to make sure that it does. So you take that measurement. And then just in case, but it's probably not going to affect anything, the hips. By the time we get down to the hips, we should have enough fullness that your hips are well covered without flaring it out any further.
I don't start flaring at the hips.
Yes, if you do your flare to start at the hips, you are going to have issues because this whole area here is going to be tight and pulling in ways that aren't attractive. What people have described to me as the sausage look. And said you want to be an elegant lady. So after you've done down to the waist, those are all, I didn't even mark hips on the one because you don't actually need that. So now we're going to go and so the first one that we do is we measure from this bone right here, which is called the nape of the neck, out to the point of the shoulder, where the shoulder goes from being mostly where the shoulder goes from being mostly horizontal to being mostly vertical. And I like to do this in 2 steps just to be sure. The first one, I measure from that bone out to the point of the shoulder. And the second one, because sometimes people are not perfectly symmetrical, I measure from point of shoulder to point of shoulder and divide that number in half.
Going over the nape, over that
Yes.
nape
Yes.
bone.
And that will make it so that whether you're horizontal, whether you're symmetrical or not, you're going to have enough room. But I like to know that I'm symmetrical because there are other things that I might need to shift around, maybe, if not. So that's your first measurement on the arm one. So that's number, I skipped around. That is actually, that is number 12, neck to point of shoulder.
You
So
know,
we'll go
next.
back up here and do the rest of our circumferences.
They count funny in French.
Pardon. So we're going to go up and do the rest of our circumferences like I should have done. Now, the biggest your arm gets is when you make a muscle. So you want to be Superman or Superwoman for this measurement. And make a muscle and have your friend measure you right there at the biggest part of the bicep muscle. That's one place that a lot of people aren't symmetrical. You want to do your dominant hand and then you want to do your non-dominant hand just to be sure, because sometimes there's a dramatic difference, sometimes there's not. Depends on what you do for a living and what you do for fun with that. So once you have your bicep circumference and you've checked both arms to make sure.
Excuse me, dog. Maybe go lie down.
You're going to do your elbow measurements. Now, I'm sure everybody has had one of those shirts, especially in childhood, where you bend your elbow and it's tight. We don't want that, not on something that we make ourselves. So the way to avoid that, put it up here. So make that Superman elbow again. This time we're measuring the elbow and we're not forcing the measuring tape down into the fold. We're just measuring the comfortable part. So we take that measurement and that is number 5, bicep circumference, 5 elbow circumference when bent. Then The next important measurement is your forearm, because some people, especially our ladies who fight, have pretty built up forearms. And that's another place you don't want your clothing to be too tight. So you take that measurement, and that is number 6, forearm circumference. And then, because you want your sleeves to be snug at the wrist, you take your wrist measurement. Your wrist measurement is 7 wrist circumference. But you have one more measurement down your arm, and that is a very elegant, open, displayed hand.
Relaxed, right?
Relaxed, displayed, elegantly open. You want enough room for a goblet cuff, and that is number 8. This is one of the measurements where I even stick a finger under there just to be sure that there is enough room. Okay. So then we do our distances.
Is this a goblet cuff?
Yes, it is.
Goblet cuff.
Goblet cuffs are beautiful all the time, but they're very nice when it's a little chilly out because your hand is half covered. So we're doing our distances now. Measuring from the nape of the neck. That's what threw me. Now you can measure down to where the bra, basically the arm side of the bra. That's where you want to measure to for the first one.
What's the arm side?
If anybody's in doubt, the arm side is the bottom of the sleeve opening, or on the bra, it's the top of the band at the sleeve.
Getting a little fresh there.
Sorry. So we measure across to that, and that is our first distance measurement, so that is number 9. Now the measurement to the bottom of the bra band is number 10. Neck to waist, there's a little divot right there, usually right above the waist of your pants unless you're wearing low riders. And also your clothes tend to catch right there. So that's your waist measurement, which is number 11. And now we've done the point of the shoulder one. Down again to the bicep, down to the point of the elbow, and I like to bend the elbow to make sure that it's visible where that is. And then to the forearm and the wrist. And then I like to make my goblets out to at least the knuckle of the pinky. So out to at least right there. They tend to pull back just a little bit, so if you want to go a little further, oh darn. Now, you have one other measurement that you need to take. That is number 18, the distance from the neck to the floor in the front. No, in the front.
My other front?
Yes, your other front. So for that, we measure right where, might be able to show better on me. Okay, see where this V comes together?
Between your clavicles.
Right there, the soft part. That's where you want to measure from the bottom of that V. And these locations, the nape of the neck, the point of the shoulder, the bottom of the V, those are useful no matter what you're measuring for. So our last one is to measure all the way down to the floor. Usually either barefoot, so you know how much to add, or in shoes that are the same thickness of sole as whatever you plan on wearing. So we take that measurement, and that's number 18. Now you can see that with each of these, it gives you instructions. Add this number, divide by this number, and add another number, which is the usual format. That will tell you what you need to do to add enough ease, divide by the number of panels that you have there, so 4 panels for the body ones, and then you divide by 2 to get the sleeve. And no, thank you. Now, I'm going to stop for a moment for questions and to give you time to do a little bit of math. Does anyone have any questions? Please either put it in chat or speak up.
You said that the sleeves are 2 panels. There's 2 seams in the sleeves then?
The sleeves aren't 2 panels, but the fabric is folded in half.
Okay.
Or for the more fitted sleeve, the pattern is folded in half while you do part of the cutting and then tweaked the rest of the way. But it still means that you need to divide that number by 2 to get the number that you want to work with.
We can only see half your face.
Yes, that's because I'm standing. And okay. Okay, so I see a question, where can we find the handouts?
Yeah, that link doesn't really, it's not really clear.
That link didn't show up?
It's there, but it's not clickable.
Okay,
So you have to copy it and I guess paste it in.
okay.
I can put the one to the entire for the event because all the handouts are on there. Because I did the one directly to there, but I can put the link that's to the TRU event.
Okay, that would be good. That would be much easier than me looking it up. Okay. Yes, and I have the PDF version and the HTML version of this same worksheet on the link that Artemisia sent to Alina sent to everybody. So that's get to it. And Octavia just sent the main one for all the handouts. So your fastest route is probably to go to chateaumichel.wordpress.com because that will take you directly to the page with the HTML, and it's got click here for the PDF version, which I'm told is easier to use. You're welcome. Is anybody going so far today as to make your own pattern? Okay. I have an example of a pattern here. When you make your pattern, okay.
Hello.
Do we have a question?
There is only one that just says that someone will actually be making changes on a pattern that had not been quite working. That's the only thing there's been, is that in the chat.
I heard somebody say something, but I couldn't tell what they had said. And I have a dog being very friendly. Okay. So, not having seen your pattern, I don't know whether it will be easier for you to start fresh or make tweaks to the pattern that you have, but I'm sure you'll be able to tell, and you can you have my contact information, so you can check with me and feel me out to see what I think if you need any help. Basically, this is an example of a pattern. I'm going to push this back a bit so you can see better. I like to make the entire pattern. So this is my neckline right here. This is the back. And this is the front. And you're going to want to make out your pattern using the worksheet. And it will tell you how to graph everything out. It's basically back to geometry class. Plot point A right here, where X is this number and Y is that number. Basically, when I'm making a pattern, I'm sorry this is so big. You've got a great big sheet of paper. I have, this is old newspaper that hadn't been used. It's basically newspaper ends. So I lay that out on the table and I measure up from the front hem, the distance that you get at the end of the map on number 18. And I measure up along this line that I've marked, and where the number that you get in number 18, that's where you draw this horizontal line. That's going to be your shoulder line. And move that down a bit. That's where you draw the shoulder line. And everything in the front panel of the pattern is, I don't know how much geometry you ladies are familiar with, but everything in the front panel is straight off the measurements. The back is positive in the y-axis and negative in the x-axis. And places like the extra for the bust and the extra in the center of the skirt, this bit here, those go down below the axis line. And that will make a whole lot more sense if you look at the last page of your handout, page 5. Because you can see the drafting pattern for the bust area and how the bust is different sizes up here depending on how big you are. And it also shows the curve for the back. So after you draft that out, you make your pattern, connect your lines, and then you use the pattern to cut out your Cotehardie. And then, I'm going to lay this aside. I have here a Cotehardie that has been cut out but hasn't been put together. So this is the front part. This is the front seam. You can see it's very curved right now, but by the time we fit it on her, it will be very minimally curved. It'll be something like this. This is where the sleeves, the seams under the sleeves are, and this is where the sleeves themselves go. The neckline, you can see, is very, very flat. This is the same neckline that I use on mine, and yet, once I put everything together and I put it on and I tighten it up here, it's very, very exposed. So part of that is because everything is lifted and supported. So it looks like there's more exposed than there really is. This gets pulled down from the truly horizontal location where it actually is.
Talk about the cover this bone. I've never heard that before.
I had a question from the other room. On the handout, I have a circle right here that says cover this. Now, I'm sure everyone has seen ladies whose gowns aren't staying up quite where they're supposed to be. And the reason is that there's nothing in this area. If your neckline is low enough that this area is uncovered, there's nothing really holding it up. You've got bones right here, it's the top of the shoulder blade. And if that area is covered, your gown can't pull down past that point, not if it's fitted anyway, without being problematic. It's not going to be able to pull down. So that's a stop on how far down your gown will go. So you can have a neckline that goes out to here and looks like it might even be about to fall off. But if this bone is covered and your gown is properly fitted, there's no way for the fabric to slip down over that bone. Now, do we have any questions from anybody? Because we can do a fitting with this Cotehardie that has started. But if anybody has a question, I don't want to move on. And okay, as a large, yes. Actually, you can. I have done a Cotehardie for a lady who was a triple G. And when we did hers, we brought it a little bit in, not even enough to cover where the bra band is, because we wanted to give the same effect, even if we wanted more support. So we brought it in just a little bit, and instead of raising the bust, we compressed the bust. We also used a heavier linen. Like on mine, I use a 5-ounce linen, and quite often I don't line it. But for hers, we used 2 layers of 10-ounce linen canvas. And with that, the amount of support that she had looked incredible. She said that it was more comfortable than any bra that she'd ever worn. And it actually looked like she was wearing a corset, even though she wasn't.
I have a question. It looks, I don't see any details about how to cut out and fit the sleeves on this handout. I may be missing something.
I can point you to that, and then I can describe how you do it. Okay. All right. go to page 2. Page 2 is the one that looks like this. Now, at the bottom of page 2, the last item before the bullet points is decide whether to cut the sleeves in one piece with the gown, which is possible for the French short-sleeved Cotehardie, which comes to here. And you've got the undergown sleeve showing there, and you have tippets here. So that makes it easier to do it that way, but it's not your only option. So you have the option of cutting the sleeve in one piece with the gown, at least for doing the short-sleeved overgown, or you can do it with a seam that is basically just a little bit out from the shoulder, just enough that you don't have weak threads right here that you have to mess with. And the other option, which I haven't used in a while, but it was my first option because it was easier and I was not sure that this was going to be enough of a difference. I put the seam right about here, which was enough that I knew for a fact I wouldn't have weak threads right here. What makes this French in style? Well, the Cotehardie, I've seen examples from France, I've seen them from England, I've seen them from Austria and Italy and Spain. And they all have the horizontal neckline, which seems to be a significant point of what this gown looks like. And I suspect is necessary to have the support. But their big place where they vary a whole lot is the sleeve. With the English pictures, even on the overgown, the sleeve goes all the way to either the wrist or the goblet cuff. So you don't see the undergown sleeve at all. In the French ones, that's where you get the white tippet right here. And above the tippet, you have the color of the overgown. Below the tippet, you have the color of the undergown sleeve. And you've got that white band separating it with the hanging bit. There's another French sleeve where, let me bring up the book. There's another French sleeve that also ends at just the elbow, but it's what I call a self sleeve, or self, because, yeah, I can find it quicker in this book. Sorry, I have to look up the picture. Basically, just before the elbow, the sleeve separates, and the front of the sleeve goes away entirely, and the back of the sleeve hangs down. So you can see the fur lining of the sleeve. So this is in Francois Boucher's 20,000 Years of Fashion. And this picture is from Boccaccio, early 15th century. The queen's sleeve goes to her elbow in the front, but it goes down to the floor in the back, and it's lined with something white that appears to be fur. That appears to be an early 15th century variation on the sleeve. I haven't seen it in the 14th century. In the 14th century, you have a lot of the white band and the separate tippet. The Italian sleeve, the oversleeve isn't fitted. You can often see wrinkles where it's pushed up, and It's not fitted, so it doesn't have buttons closing it. The Austrian sleeve, you've got an option that looks like a loose version of the English sleeve with a goblet cuff. And you've also got what we call the angel sleeve, where it just starts to flare open. And I haven't studied Austrian enough to know whether this is just something that developed as a precursor, an early version of the houppelande, or whether it developed on its own and was worn for some amount of time before then. But that's an Austrian sleeve option. Me with the French persona, of course, I have to go with one of the French styles. But today I'm just wearing one layer, so it looks English. And do we have any more questions?
I actually had a question about the use of 4 panels and the way the grain falls. I've used 4 panels. I've also used the variant that a lot of folks use where they model it off of the Harianne's gown that has multiple panels, like 8 gores under the arm, 4 on each side, and then 2 wide gores in the center, seams front and back. And that artwork doesn't really define seams very well, but it does seem that there is a transition. The extant golden gown or the Uppsala gown is only 4 panels. So do you know exactly when the concept of switching from the old gore style, the fabric Krugel style, to a 4 panel only would have occurred, and how do you counter the bias to bias seams?
I wouldn't counter the bias to bias seams. I would use them. And
Aha.
yes.
I don't know if you want to like leave it off outside.
The trick with a lot of medieval clothing is not how to counter this, how to counter that. The trick with a lot of medieval clothing is how to use what the fabric wants to do to make an effect that you want. So for example, with the bust, you've got a self-supporting bust because the area right below here is very, very snug. And then you've got room here. So if you use the little bit of bias stretch that you get by having a curve right here in the bust, that gives you just enough room to have your bust up and centered a little bit and right where you want it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the center seam from the waist down on the straight then? And how about the center back seam?
Let me spread out this Cotehardie and show you. That out of here entirely. Okay.
Your Excellency, just going to check in that width's 352, so coming near to the end of the time.
Okay. Well, let me show what this looks like. And I do have those links to my YouTube channel up. Okay. So if you need any further assistance, the videos are helpful. I was able to get into a lot more detail with the videos than I am in person. And okay, you see here, the skirt on the sides flares out 40-degree angle. This is the center front. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've got a little bit of flare to the pattern. Basically, the width of your bust, I added to the bottom of the skirt. So you've got a little bit of flare, like you've got a tall, skinny gore, without actually having to have a seam there, which in my opinion is ideal.
It's integrated then. Okay.
Then we come to the back. Okay. And on the side, oops, I'm showing, trying to see where I'm showing. Okay. So this is the back on the side. This is the back part of the sleeve opening, and this is the back part of the side seam. Then this is the back of your back, and you can see that's got a gentle curve here because your shoulder blades take up space. And then it pulls in, kind of in the area between your under bust and your waist. And then
About the small of the back then?
at the, actually a little above the small of the back, because
Okay.
you want the flare to start high, just like you want the flare to start high on the front and on the sides.
Okay.
Yes. And then that flares out, and we reach the edge of the fabric, so you need to put in some rectangular or some triangular pieces of fabric called godets. We usually call them gores, but they're properly called godets. We add them to make enough fullness to make the skirt flow right. You can see the back sides will each need one. The center opening in the back will need one on each side, or one that's basically an isosceles triangle instead of a right triangle. The front doesn't need one because you have that one built in. And you have godets shaped like right triangles at the front as well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And my email address is on the worksheet. So if anyone has any questions that aren't answered already, or if you don't know how to get to the YouTube, just email me directly, and I will be glad to answer any further questions. Do we have any last questions before the class ends?
I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording if that's okay.
Okay, yes.